Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Surah An-Nahl, chapter 16, and we will go through verses 98 to 105 today. Acquiring complete conviction in the Quran. These are the references, and this is our contact in case there is any query, question, or any other comment on this presentation as well as any of our past presentations. Recap of the verse 1697. If we remember, we only did one verse, which was on Iman and Amal Saleh. So I'll go through some of the salient points of that presentation. Context of that verse was that the world around us, we should look at that. Human choice and intent is the basic attribute of every human being because we do not have any inner guidance. The purpose of human creation is to let human beings act according to their choices. Constraints imposed by the man-made systems, and those are the ones which serve as signs and create a need for an alternative system based on the permanent values of the Quran. What is the Quranic position on this? Two paths of life are made clear, i.e., either the path of our unbridled desires or the path of the permanent values of the Quran, and then the choice is left to us. We have an I, then we have consciousness, intellect, desires, emotions, feelings, memory, body, etc. Our brain produces thoughts continuously and we need to be aware of them. And that is important, that we should be able to separate the two, that the thoughts which are coming to us, we should be able to not only recognize them, but then see the consequences of acting on those thoughts. And that is where our choice and intent comes in, and that is where the permanent values play their role. Whatever value system we have, it helps to make decisions at every crossroad in our life. Next is the Quran presents itself as an external criterion to provide guidance in our life, and this is where we need to have Iman through a process. It is not faith or belief. It is the process and procedure of acquiring conviction through evidence and rational thinking within the orbit of the Quranic value system. A new self-concept appears within us when we acquire this Iman. It is not merely a mechanical way to understand it. We need to acquire and accept it so that a tangible change takes place within us, i.e., in our psyche. And this new psyche which we acquire, it is signposted throughout the Quran, and some of the signs we will be going through today. And we start to see problems in the world with the Quranic perspective in mind and do salih deeds in order to understand the system of deen. So thoughts alone don't change us. It is the subsequent deeds which help us to bring the best out of us. The Quran guides us in this aspect throughout our life until we leave this physical world. And over here, we are seeking guidance from the Quran. The Quran itself will not do any magic to us. It is us we have to act on this guidance. An overview of today's presentation. Here the Quran has spelled out the procedure by which to obtain the maximum benefit from the study of the Quran. There will be opposition to this message as it goes against the prevalent order in any society, and the vested interests do not give up easily. So we need to be aware of this and take precautions. Next point is people who follow their unguided desires, and Quran calls them shaitan plus iblis. We have gone through these aspects previously as well, but it is good to remind ourselves. Will try their best to distract and divert from the path of the Quran. However, those who acquire Iman and have firm conviction in the system of Rububiyyat, they will not give up and will never resort to shirk, i.e., they will never associate man-made laws with the laws of Allah. And that is why we need to work collectively, so that if one person makes an error or does not understand properly, then somebody else should remind him. During this journey, people will come with all kinds of arguments and objections against the message of Allah. For example, that some verses are cancelled, that some parts of the message have changed from the past, that the messenger has made it up of his own accord. And we know a number of things which have been prevailing among the religious sects. By remaining firmly on this path, the self becomes strengthened and gradually results do start to manifest of the human efforts on Sirat al-Mustaqim. And the biggest change is which we experience our own self within us and in our conduct and behavior. Keep in mind that guidance only comes to those who seek it. This is the law of Allah. Those who do not want guidance, they do not get it. Their path leads them to failure and perdition, as physical life will come to an end at some point in time. Now let us go to the first verse of today's presentation, 1698, guidance provided on the study of the Quran. فَإِذَا قَرَأْتَ الْقُرْآنَ فَاسْتَعِذْ بِاللَّهِ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ. When you will start to act practically on the Quranic program, then the vested interests of people and rebellious powers will oppose it strongly. At that time, there will be the need for you to seek the means of protection from the harmful effects of destructive elements by adhering to the laws of Allah with even greater intensity. If we look at the normal translation, then we will see that it does not take us towards the system or any effort on this path, and it is worthwhile looking at common translations. The root of Quran is QRA. Basically, it means to gather something and then to keep it preserved. For example, the fetus in a mother's uterus. It also means to bring things together to meet with each other. For further details, see Lughatul Quran. We will now examine its meanings in relation to the Quran itself. The word Quran, as per Zujaj, is on the weight of fulan, which means to gather. It is called Quran because it brings together surahs and joins these up. It is called Quran because it has gathered up the explanations, judgments about lawful and unlawful, promises, signs, values, models, and verses all together in a book form. Raghib says it is called the Quran because it contains the summary of the revealed books, or rather contains the outcome of all knowledge in a collected form. And obviously, all this knowledge is in relation to providing guidance to mankind. In relation to the Quran, it is stated in 75:17, Inna alayna jamahu wa Quranahu. To collect it and keep it safe is our responsibility. And then the next verse is Faiza Qaranahu fattabe Quranahu. So when we collect it, then you follow this compiled wahi. Then in the next verse, Summa inna alayna bayanahu. Furthermore, it is for us to explain it. And it's interesting that despite all these verses in the Quran and people read them as well, still they become misguided because they are not looking at the Quran as a book of guidance. Next slide is, the Quran was in the form of the book during the lifetime of Rasulullah. The evidence for this is noted within the Quran itself, because Quran in the second chapter, Zalik al-Kitabu la raiba fihi hudal lil muttaqin. Al-Kitab points to this fact that this is the only book which was revealed to Rasulullah. Some quote that Qara is a Hebrew word which means to make an announcement. From this, it will mean to make a general proclamation. For example, Quran says, Ikra bi ismi rabbika, proclaim the attribute of Rububiyat of your Rabb. And that is why it is important that the Quran should be explained and discussed verbally among us as well. It is not just reading it at our own, because community only forms up when we come together and discuss it. Whatever was revealed to the messenger as wahi, it is preserved in the Quran. Wa ohiya ilayya hazal Quranu. This Quran has been revealed to me through wahi. Mu'mineen are commanded to obey it and nothing else. And Quran says, Kitabun unzila alayka, and then verse concludes, Zikra lil mu'mineen. Book sent down to you to teach mu'mineen. And zikr means that this book is the one which has the eminence for human beings, so that they can attain higher levels, so that they can establish the system of deen by developing their own self. Those who do not decide according to it are kafir. وَمَنْ لَمْ يَحْكُمْ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْكَافِرُونَ. And again, people read these verses and then they ignore and move on. If any do fail to judge by what Allah has revealed, they are kafir, and as a result fail to get benefits associated with deen. And we can see the state of the world, because this is what is being practiced. The responsibility for its protection and preservation is taken by Allah Himself. Inna nahnu nazzalna al-zikra wa inna lahu lahafizun. We have surely sent down the dhikr and we will surely guard it. And it's very interesting. It starts with la hafizun, that this is for the protection of mankind, that it has been protected and preserved, because human beings tend to tamper things which they don't like. And this is what happened to previous revelations and previous books. Some more salient points regarding the Quran out of this verse 1698. The messenger was commanded to obey the Quran. The messenger used to judge in accordance with it. I've quoted these references over here and we can look at it from the Quran. The teaching of Allah has appeared completely in this and no individual can make any change in it. And that is the Quran's text itself. There is no contradiction and inconsistency in it. People can find contradiction and inconsistency which is introduced by their own mind, their own thought process. If we approach the Quran as Quran says, La ilaha illallah, if we approach it with an empty mind, without any preconceived ideas and our own belief systems, then we will see that there is no contradiction, and which is of a great assurance, because if there is the message is consistent with itself, that means once we start following it, then what it claims that will happen, the change will start occurring within us as well as collectively. All differences can be removed through it. Whatever is noted in it, Allah Himself has clarified it as well. It is light itself, and light does not need another light to manifest itself. And Quran has called itself Nurun Mubin. This is bestowed so that man can tread his journey of life in its light. It is made easy to seek guidance and advice. And it is only becomes easy when we acquire the Iman the way Quran guides us. That is, we take out all beliefs, preconceived ideas within our mind, and then let Allah's concept sink into our heart and mind, and then we will see that how change occurs within our own self. For this, it is essential that man should try to seek its guidance by making his heart and mind free from human ideas and beliefs. Focused study of the Quran. Let us look at the verse in slightly more detail. Continuing from the previous verse where we went through Iman plus solid deeds in some detail, here the Quran reminds us that to get the best out of its study and then its proclamation around you to others needs a transformation in the human psyche. We have seen that Quran is continuously addressing to human I, that is me as a human being. And then it is asking us to look at our present state of psyche and then see that what kind of psyche the Quran is helping us to create one within our own self. An important aspect is that understanding it as individuals is very important, and a Jamaat based on such solid individuals will be a very strong team coming together, just like the interconnectedness of the Quran itself. With this becoming part of the human psyche, a very strong Iman will emerge in these human beings. By stating Fastaiz Billah, the verse assures us that if we obey what is in the Quran, then in all stages of the growth and development of the Jamaat, the protection of Allah's laws will remain available. And this will be based on evidence. We can look at the root of Fastaiz. Auz is also from here, that is giving protection. Within both the psyche as well as the physical aspect of it through security and protective measures. The verse concludes by pointing to the aspects of unbridled desires, ash-shaitan al-rajim, from shaitan to the condemned one. These desires and emotions within us can distract us from the path of Allah. Thus, we need to remain on guard constantly and deal with these through a highly developed consciousness in light of the permanent values and by coming together as covered under verse 3:103, where Quran has asked the Mu'mineen to be united so their hearts become one. Now, next verse 1699, remaining alive to our emotive makeup and to deal with it using the Quranic value system, and it is related to Rububiyat. Innahu laisa lahu sultanun alal lazina amanu wa ala rabbihim yatawakkalun. Remember, these destructive forces, whether these are within a person or are external, can never overcome those people who have conviction in the truth of the laws of Allah and have complete trust in their concreteness. And obviously, this takes time. Let us look at some more points of interest under this verse. Continuing from the previous verse, here the signs of the developed selves are noted in a very attractive style by Allah. Let us analyze this in a few steps. By mentioning Shaitan, which includes Iblisi traits as well, and we know Shaitan is more on the side of impulsiveness of human beings, that is, people want quick results, and Iblis is on the side of hopelessness and despair. In the previous verse, the human condition devoid of guidance is noted, and all those problems which are associated with this condition need to be brought to mind. And for example, I've just given some examples over here. For example, doubts arise in our heart and mind, suspicions about one's aim, and this is very, very debilitating. If doubts arise in our mind about our aim, goal, destination in life, then we are done. Adornment of evil deeds, miserliness, spreading evil, disunity, corruption, heedlessness, forgetfulness, resorting to differences, conflicts, lies, hypocrisy. Iblis will lead to despair and hopelessness. Here the verse notes that all these negative proclivities have been overcome by these followers of Allah's laws through their own efforts using the guidance of Allah. Hence, Shaitan and Iblis cannot now influence their thinking and actions, which are now in line with Iman and Saleh deeds. And that is what it means, A'udhu Billahi Minash Shaitanir Rajim. And important is that we should become very conscious of these things. That is, what kind of thoughts arise within our own heart and mind, and also those people who do not come to the Quran or who haven't been exposed to the guidance of the Quran, or those who have rejected it, they will have all these limitations and weaknesses in some form present within them. From this, it also means that Saleh deeds are performed to overcome these negative tendencies, which become a hurdle to developing latent potentials, and thus the best starts to manifest itself from them, which becomes a sign of a developing and growing self. A lot there in terms of human psyche. Some signs of developed thinking. The next sign highlighted is that they acquire Iman through this process of self-discipline and steadfastness on this path. It also means that this is a continuous process as they are subjected to these destructive forces, and Quran calls them batil in the word, because batil is which leads to destruction, which leads to ruin. And what is the biggest ruin and destructiveness for human beings? That they lived all their life over here, suffered a lot because of man-made system, and then they find nothing in the hereafter as well. So this is important for us to keep this in mind. As they are subjected to these destructive forces, batil in the word, and as they have developed their selves and acquired the ability to counter it after its recognition, hence they cannot be overwhelmed by it. And what do they achieve by doing this? They recognize the need for rububiyat in the human world, the absence of which creates problems for mankind. They have witnessed the ruin and destruction caused by the system of batil, and they keep this aspect in mind all the time. And Quran has stated at another place about mu'mineen, yakhafuna yawman kana sharruhu mustatira. They fear a day whose evil flies far and wide, and this includes both physical plus cognitive aspects are included. Because physical, we can see in the world that what is going on in terms of bombing and creating conflicts and chaos everywhere in the world. But these things also have impact on our psyche. So Quran takes into account everything, and we should also look at it, because khawf is created in our psyche because of the events around us, or even the perceived events around us. They understand that this task of theirs is not easy, but their Iman has given them that resoluteness which leads to complete trust and confidence in the aid of the laws of Allah. They gain sufficient evidence of the functioning of the law of requital and come to this conclusion through their own empirical evidence that this is that very Sirat-e-Mustaqim. See, there is no blind faith over here. There is no blind following over here. Quran consistently tells us that we should use our perception, our senses, as well as our intellect and reasoning to come to some conclusion after looking at the tangible events taking place around us. Next verse 16:100, dealing with any distractions. Innama sultanuhu alallazina yatawallawnahu wallazina hum bihi mushrikun. Their supremacy and authority is only over those people who make them their companions and supporters, or over those who include other laws together with the laws of Allah, and live life in accordance with these destructive forces can never overwhelm those who live under the obedience of the pure laws of Allah. Let us look at this verse in slightly more detail. Further reflections 16:100. Continuing in the next verse, there are a few more points relating to the human psyche and its manifestations in the man-made systems around us. Human beings do things collectively and they gain strength in doing wrong by getting others to be their accomplices. It is very difficult for a single person if he is creating problems in the world because others will stop him and he also has a fear of others. But people who are in power, they try to get accomplices, and that is where we have to be very alert and know how the system functions. A tyrant in the world cannot do it alone. He has willing followers in the millions, and we witness this in the world around us, and Quran has pointed to this fact in a number of verses. This is the way unguided minds or eyes function in the human world. And the Quran draws our attention to this aspect repeatedly by pointing to the evil state of their selves. For example, they create fear and huzn, and they create it deliberately. There are departments in every country, particularly under intelligence and cyber warfare, whose job is to look into ways and means to create fear and huzn, because then they can force the people towards compliance. Chaos, conflicts, wars, differences, deceptions, bloodshed, exploitation, injustices, lies, divisiveness, hypocrisy called diplomacy, might is right, and divide and rule. And all these things we have gone through in different parts of our presentations. But the point over here is that these things exist in the world which is not guided by the Quran. It is important for us to recognize it and then stick to the Quran, because the solution lies over here, because the law of Allah is going to help those who are working on this path together. Just to reflect on the language of this verse, the addressee is Mu'mineen who have entered into a covenant with Allah, and here he is informing them in a very caring manner to be mindful of these people. And that is the beauty of the Quran, that when it addresses Mu'mineen, it provides us strength. It tells us that not to be despondent, not to be in despair, never become hopelessness, because now you have held on to that rope of Allah, i.e. the Quran, which is going to take you to success. They will act as a hindrance on this path of ours, Allah as a companion. For example, in verse 2041, Quran says in relation to Hazrat Musa alayhi salam, "Wastanatuka li nafsi." I have prepared you, O Moses, for myself. The question we need to pose to our eye, am I ready for this? And that is something very important, that once we go through this process of Iman and solid deeds and understand the Quran and gain that strength, then our stage will reach where the team will come together very strongly, and then things will start taking place in the outer world. Now, contaminated mind affects human psyche. Continuing on the same verse 16:100, the verse then concludes by stating, "Wallazina hum bihi mushrikun," to be aware of shirk and of those who manifest this kind of psyche, as they can easily deceive Mu'mineen. They apparently pose as Mu'mineen but conceal their conflicted intellectual dispositions and thus can harm the cause of Allah. And this is a very difficult stage which comes at some point in time for this Jamaat of Mu'mineen, that people who are hiding their true intentions inside and they have a contaminated minds, but outwardly they portray as if they have become Mu'mineen, whereas they are not. And one has to exclude them at some point in time. And in order to exclude them, one has to have very strong desire within us and a very detailed understanding of the values of the Quran. This seems to be an apparently very difficult task to deal with these people. However, It becomes easier as Iman is strengthened through Saleh deeds, because with the emergence of new life, we can perceive their psyche in the light of the Quranic guidance. What are some of their signs noted by the Quran? Shirk is a state of the human mind where human beings do not fully commit to the laws of Allah and as a result contaminate these with man-made laws. In such a state, they can never be of any use to the establishment of the system of deen. And we have seen through our study of the Quran that Quran wants a very unified outlook, a very unified vision, which is not contaminated by any other thought, any other laws. And one achieves that over a period of time. It is not a change which will come overnight, but once we have understood the finer aspects of Iman and then strengthened our Iman through Saleh deeds, then one will reach that stage where things will make themselves clear. However, they cause a lot of harm to those efforts which Mu'mineen make towards establishing the system, because such people slow you down by their distractions. And it is important to recognize them and then ask them to go somewhere else. This platform is not for them. They are very hard to detect and require a highly developed self to identify such psyches and then to deal with them firmly. This is why the Quran calls it La tushrik billahi innal shirka la zulmun azim. Do not associate with Allah, for indeed associating with His laws is a supreme injustice. And this injustice we do against our own selves, because just see the world around us. Because of absence of a system of deen, we cannot take refuge anywhere. And there is so much gross injustice being done to poor people in the world who are weak, destitute, because this leads to creating yatim and miskeen in the world. Some more signs of shirk. Causing divisions and resorting to sectarianism is declared to be shirk. وَلَا تَكُونُوا مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ. Do not be among mushrikeen min allazina farraku deenahum, because they split up the deen, who split up their deen into sects. And that is important, that people who are divisive and try to split or start creating factions, we must oppose them and ask them to go somewhere else. Deeds go wasted through this. وَلَوْ أَشْرَكُوا لَحَبِطَ عَنْهُمْ مَا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ. If they resort to shirk, all their deeds will go waste. Relate this to Iman as a prerequisite to bringing out our best on this path. We can witness this happening in the world of today, for example, the state of the Muslim world. This emerges through fear. فِي قُلُوبِ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا رُعْبًا بِمَا أَشْرَكُوا بِاللَّهِ. Fear will become created in the hearts of those who resort to kufr because of their shirk with regards to Allah. Shirk can also be one of the traits of those who display kufr. It is an injustice against one's own self. What can be a bigger injustice against one's own self, that their latent potentials will never manifest themselves in the world, and as a result, they will be in loss in this world as well as in the hereafter. Obedience to non-Allah is shirk. In today's world, when deen is not established anywhere, it will mean the willing obedience of batil and not striving for the system of deen. And this is no excuse for us, those who have come to the Quran, and to say that we cannot do at least the minimum. First stage is to understand what exactly the system is, and second stage is to bring a new self within us, and then third stage is to stay together, stay united, and keep striving on this path together while doing saleh deeds wherever is possible. And of course, coming together in itself becomes a saleh deed, because some of our attributes can only manifest themselves when we come together and discuss things together. Recognizing the wrong system and then rejecting it is part of accepting Iman. Iman and saleh deeds help us to acquire that psyche which provides us with that self which can create that inner resolve and unity essential for this path. And it is a path. It is not something which is static at one place. Let us go to the next verse, 16:101, understanding the process of wahi. وَإِذَا بَدَّلْنَا آيَاتًا مَكَانَ آيَاتٍ وَاللَّهُ أَعْلَمُ بِمَا يُنَزِّلُ قَالُوا إِنَّمَا أَنْتَ مُفْتَرٍ بَلْ أَكْثَرُهُمْ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. When we mention non-divine laws, then these people of the book say that if the commands of the Quran are from Allah, then why are some of them different from those commands which Allah had previously sent towards them before this? The truth is that among those commands which were sent towards them, most of them are such in which they have tampered or have simply not remained in their original form. And some are such that they are given only on a temporary basis. And we can figure out very easily by reading Torah and Bible and other books of other religions. Now, in their stead, better commands than them are given on a permanent basis. This is that point on which they say that these commands are not from the direction of Allah. These are invented by this messenger himself, whereas Allah knows well what kinds of commands need to be issued at what time, and these people do not have knowledge of this. Further reflections on this verse 101. The next issue to which the Quran has drawn our attention is regarding the verses being revealed progressively, as well as some being different from those revealed in the past to the people of the book. The observation being made by the people pertains to both aspects of the revelation of the Quran. While the permanent values revealed through Wahy remain the same throughout human existence, some aspects under these values will need to be modified in view of the state of development of the era in which the revelation is being communicated. Secondly, all previous books of Allah were tampered with by human beings, and the human beings are very good at tampering things, and we know it. And this is referred to in other places as well as being evident from history. We have seen that even recent events of history are being manipulated and tampered. So in terms of Allah's books, which people don't like to follow, they are going to bring in their own desires into it. The existing condition of these books, for example, the Bible, point to this fact when we evaluate them in the light of the pure Quranic criteria. And it's very interesting and very instructive that we should go through some parts of the Bible after understanding the Quran, and we will see where the things are in line with what is stated in the Quran. For example, what you sow, so shall you reap. And most of it is all made up. We have seen that despite the existence of the protected and preserved status of the Quran, Muslims have also produced tampered material and called it the sayings of the last messenger. What is the outcome of doing this? Ruin, backwardness, degradation, and humiliation in the world in every sphere of life. Because if human psyche is contaminated by this material and the pure Quran is not there, or even if pure Quran is there only partly, then that becomes shirk, that becomes kufr, and these people can never ever get the benefits of what is stated in the Quran because their minds are contaminated. And when human psyche is contaminated, how can their conduct and behavior going to be in line with the Quran? And that is the point we should keep in mind, that this book is for us so that we can acquire that new psyche which can establish the system of deen which Allah requires us to have, so that all those duties can be carried out which Allah has said that these are His duties as noted in the Quran, and we went through it in our last presentation. Few more comments on this verse 101. As a student of the Quran, as a system of deen, one need not be concerned about these things, as this is how human beings who are not looking for guidance behave and conduct themselves. So there is no point of becoming discouraged about it or becoming hopeless about it, because this is the way human system is supposed to function, that human beings will make mistakes through their own choices. They will not be attracted towards something which is talking about long-term effects, and they want to go for immediate benefits of life. And this is part of human psyche. Here the Quran has recorded this fact for our education and training, that this is what we will find in our world, and this is how these people will oppose the message of Allah. And here the Quran repeatedly gives us hope, those who are on this path, that Allah is with you, and which essentially means that His laws are working for those who are on this path. The next part of the verse makes it clear that Allah knows what is being revealed and its necessity for providing guidance to those who are looking for it. See how the Quran reports it by stating that they say, Kalu innama anta muftarin. You are but a forger. One does not have to say this clearly today, but the response and reaction to the pure Quran is enough to know this. And we hear that kind of things as well, that when you talk to someone, they will say only scholars can interpret the Quran. And if we tell them that, why did you translate them? What was the purpose of translating them? Of course, translations have a lot of weaknesses, and then they don't have an answer. We can see this happening clearly. For example, in the Muslim world, totally immersed in the material world and completely oblivious of their accountability and, of course, their responsibility. And while they are shirking their responsibility of not establishing deen, then they supplicate and pray day and night for protection of Palestinians. So there is a contradiction in their behavior on a continuous basis. The belief regarding the cancellation of any of the verses of the Quran in sectarian versions of Islam is all false. The Quran is complete and its integrity is fully preserved for all times. And this is for our own benefit. We should use this aspect to understand the Quran and then act on it, firstly developing our own self, then coming together and working towards the system of deen collectively. This point is evidence in itself. Once we come to grips with it as a system, all these falsehoods are created to distract people from the system of deen. The verse factually concludes by stating, Bal aksaruhum la yalamun. Most of them do not have knowledge or do not pause, reflect, and make an effort to know. So if they show some proclivity towards gaining knowledge, then things will start becoming clearer on them. Next verse 16:102, seeking strength through Allah's wahi. Qul nazzalahu ruhul qudus min rabbika bil haqqi li yusabbit allazina amanu wa hudam wa bushra lil muslimin. Say to them that Ruhul Qudus, which is in reference to Jibreel, has descended with this Quran from the direction of your Rabb as a concrete evidence, so that the hearts of those who have accepted Iman are kept strong by it. And it guides to the correct destination those people who bow down their heads before it, and gives them glad tidings about the blessings of the future. The Quran fidelity is beyond doubt. In response to the previous verse, Allah has provided reassurance to the Muslims regarding the Quran that this wahi sent to the messenger from his Rabb through the medium of Ruhul Qudus. Firstly, it is coming by stages. Secondly, it is for the system of Rububiyyat, i.e. to replace the man-made systems and to relieve human beings from those chains in which they are trapped by those with unbridled intellects and power. And thirdly, it is coming through the medium which has the potential of deliver it securely, uncontaminated, and with all its wherewithal. And that is where Ruhul Qudus, this term, comes into play. The term Ruh has many meanings in the Lughatul Quran, which includes, for example, blowing of the wind. So it is related to energy, vastness and expanse, comfort, happiness, pleasure, rahmat, help, justice, which provides comfort and peace, wahi, divine energy in relation to human choice and intent. So all these meanings are applicable, but we have to select which one is applicable to the aspect of Ruhul Qudus and which is related to wahi and divine energy. The term Al-Quds, free from all kinds of faults and blemishes, strive to the utmost, meaning cleansing, purifying, also used in relation to the angel Jibreel or Gabriel, Ruhul Qudus, who is linked with the communication of wahi of the Quran to the messenger of Allah. So it is about the medium through which wahi comes to the messenger, and then the messenger receives it and then passes on to fellow human beings. A few more reflections on this verse. This verse and others like this provides reassurance to Mu'mineen that what is revealed in the Quran does not include an iota of any human thoughts and ideas, i.e. the messenger simply cannot add anything to this message, as the medium through which it is coming is Ruhul Qudus. And this is important. I have given it a lot of thought. And if we read about it, in particularly, for example, in human self and Iblis, we will come to these terms that we cannot know about this medium, but it gives us assurance that integrity of the Quran is absolute and it is fully preserved and protected, as the Quran says that Allah has protected it. And that gives us assurance, but the biggest assurance comes when we follow it. Firstly, we understand it and say that this is not the product of human mind. Human intellect simply cannot produce anything like the Quran because human mind doesn't think on those lines. We can then relate to all that we come across in the Quran, and this helps to expand our vision and consciousness, and then becomes evidence in itself that the Quran simply cannot be the product of the human thought process. And that is where we have to concentrate. That could I think like that, what is given in the Quran? And particularly once we go through the books of Tulu Islam, that is Allama Parvez, we will see the way things have been explained as part of the system, that human minds don't think like that. The comparison with the state of the man-made systems also provides guidance for this. And that is why we still have man-made systems in the world, because those who claim to be the custodians of the Quran and holders of the Quran haven't thought about these things and never aimed to establish the system of deen, because they didn't even recognize if they have a self in the first place. And that is the problem human beings have. This should give added strength and determination to Mu'mineen, which they confirm by accepting its guidance. And the transformation of the self into a new being called Mu'min becomes evidence of the truth of the Quran itself. So once we acquire that new self, a new life within us, then it becomes an evidence for us individually, and of course collectively, if all of these people come together and form a Jamaat, form a team, then it becomes an evidence itself that it does bring that change which it claims to bring that change if we understand and follow it. The verse then concludes by providing glad tidings to Mu'mineen that Allazina amanu wa hudan wa bushra lil Muslimin. Having acquired Iman and by coming together, the guidance will manifest its outcomes, and this will lead to glad tidings and to becoming Muslims. And what are these glad tidings? Initially, the changes come within us. The things which we couldn't understand previously, for example, in man-made systems, now we start to understand them. The word now is making sense to us. Let us go to the next verse, 103, not to pay attention to any distraction. وَلَقَدْ نَعْلَمُ أَنَّهُمْ يَقُولُونَ إِنَّمَا يُعَلِّمُهُ بَشَرٌ لِسَانُ الَّذِي يُلْحِدُونَ عَلَيْهِ أَعْجَمِيٌّ وَهَذَا لِسَانٌ عَرَبِيٌّ مُبِينٌ. We also know that these people say that some individual comes and teaches him, that is this messenger, that is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, these things, and he presents these to the people by calling it wahi. While saying this, these people do not even bother to think this much, that the individual whom they are relating this, his speech is very incoherent and discordant, and his speech is ajmi. And this Quran is in very perspicuous, clear, and pristine Arabic language, i.e., aside from the fact that the realities of the Quran cannot be devised by any human intellect, its style of expression is also very lofty and eminent. And we should keep in mind that Arabic over here is come opposite of Ajmi. Arabic means that language which is very coherent, very comprehensive, and eloquent, and makes things clear. Human beings raise all kinds of objections to the Quranic guidance because they don't like it. And when we don't like something, we will start pointing to some faults and we will try to reject it so that we can satisfy ourselves that this is not from me and I have rightly rejected it for my own reasons. And this we observe in the world continuously. Some people say that they don't like someone. For example, whole racism is based on this, that one race does not like the color of another race. Another important point is raised in relation to the message of the Quran. Here the response appears to be for that era, in that some people used to say that Rasulullah is being inspired by someone, and then whatever he learns, he passes it on as the way of Allah. Here the Quran has noted the difference between the quality, style, and eloquence of the text of the Quran and the kind of expression of this person. And Quran says, وَهَذَا لِسَانٌ Arbiyun Mubin. The language of the Quran is poles apart from this individual who is Ajmi, even if he is Arab, but his speech, conversation, not clear and is ambiguous. And this is important. Ajmi, then later on, firstly, it was used for in terms of the language of someone if it was incoherent and ambiguous. But later on, Arabs started using it for all those who were non-Arabs as well. And we should keep this aspect in mind when this term appears in the Quran. And we can look at the Lugat al-Quran as well. we do come across this kind of reporting that the Quran is the book written by Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I've noted here, peace be upon him, or that he was inspired by the Bible or Torah and he copied it from there. However, even Western writers have noted that what is in the Quran in terms of its style, layout, and content is quite unique. To any genuine student of the Quran who is looking for guidance and is moved by the problems created by man-made systems, such issues are of the least concern. So whoever has come on this path, these should not distract us. We should stay on this path because we have rationally, through our own reasoning, using our own reasoning, we have come to this path and found that this path is for us. We have seen that as we progress in learning about the Quran as a system of deen, the truth of this book keeps becoming clearer the deeper we delve into it. Further elaboration, a few general issues we need to keep in mind with regard to understanding and following its principles and precepts so that doubts do not arise and we can also understand others who become hurdles on its path. These doubts and suspicions about the message of the Quran is very important to get rid of them because these do arise in our mind and we have to counter them through empirical evidence which is available around us, within us, and of course, all the values of the Quran. Those who are such supporters of the man-made systems, which include all kinds of so-called intellectuals, including religionists from all persuasions and creeds, do not wish to lose their benefits from being its beneficiaries. And these things do arise in human mind that if I follow the Quran, I will lose all this because there are verses in the Quran which are asking to draw our attention. Even the basic verse of covenant is that Allah has purchased the possessions and life of believers. And if that means that we have to make everything available on the path of Allah as and when it is required. And this is a very discomforting thought for someone who is not fully committed to the path of Allah. The question arises that why do some of them study the Quran if it is not the system they are looking for? Many are in it for religious reasons, and the main one is the earning of sawab, i.e. that invisible reward of reading it. And this is very deeply embedded in people. They have an emotive affinity for it, and under this thin veneer of religiosity, we can easily see their true motive. They have absolutely no concern about the common man in the world. And these are important things that we should come to terms with that. That is why Quran has put down these psychological limitations of human beings and their vulnerabilities in its verses. Many have now made it a business to earn some advertising money, and they do it by getting maximum subscribers. And we see these things on YouTube and other social media. Anything that sells religiously, they will sell it. We can watch their channel and easily figure this out using the knowledge we have gained on this platform. Some who have read Allama Pervez but are not fully convinced take their own path, and deep down they have the same assumption that the system of deen cannot be established. Hence, just read the Quran and discuss it endlessly by taking one issue without any reference to solving human problems. And we come across this kind of mentality as well and outlook. And what we need to do is to use it to educate ourselves, train ourselves so that as and when the system of deen starts to become established, we are careful about these people. Most simply, do not understand the issue of self-development as they never possess one. Next verse is 16:104. Divine guidance only becomes available to those who seek it. And so we cannot convince anyone to come to this path. They have to create conviction themselves. Inna allazina la yu'minuna bi ayatillahi la yahdihimullahu wa lahum azabun alim. The truth is that those people who have already decided that they are just not going to accept the divine laws, how can they receive guidance towards the correct path? For them, there is a chastising punishment. Just see how strong language the Quran has used against those people who are not willing to come to this path or who are not seeking guidance in life. Further reflections on this verse 104. After noting a number of points relating to the human psyche in the previous verses, here the Quran has taken us a step further and higher and drawn our attention to the path we have followed in acquiring Iman. If, despite all the signs in the world and the universe and the signs within our own psyche, people still do not question their own creation and do not look for guidance, then what else will attract them to the path of Allah? I've given it a lot of thought, and I'm sure all of us have given a lot of thought in our life, that something which attracted us towards the Quran and others are not attracted, then what is the difference between the two? And if they are not attracted, it automatically should lead to this conclusion, which the Quran said over here, that they ignore the signs of Allah. They just live their life at animalistic level. Unlike animals, only humans have the ability to question their existence and the issues of life around them in the world. By calling it animalistic level, we are not degrading any human being from their inherent respect and dignity. Animalistic level is related to the behavior that despite possessing that respect and dignity which Allah has given them, they are not willing to come to terms with their own guidance, with the higher purpose of their own life. And as a result, not only they harm themselves, but they are contributing to all the injustices and wrongs which are happening in the world. We can see in the world of 2023, where there is so much chaos, conflicts, and bloodshed, how many categories of human beings can be identified based on evidence. There are people who deliberately create these problems through careful planning and execution, and we can see that. Others who provide them willing support, we can see that as well. There are some who remain neutral, and we can see plenty of them in the world. There are some who oppose all these injustices and raise their voices, and again, we can see that. But if you give them the message of the Quran, they will not come to the Quran. A few who are willing to stand up against the system through exposing these crimes and their perpetrators, and we can see that as well, that there are a number of, for example, journalists in the world who are exposing the wrongs being done in the world. However, how many are there to follow the guidance of the Quran, to become Allah's companions in the cause of Allah, to work for the system of Deen? And this is an important question which should be in our mind when we are talking to other people and see how they respond. Few more comments on this verse 104. Here the Quran has informed us that guidance only comes to those who are looking for it, and Allah does not guide people to his path unless they go through the process and procedure of using their choice and intent. We need to know it from our own experience on this path. There is no quick fix here. And we should keep reminding ourselves that on this path, there is no quick fix. Allah's laws take their time to manifest their results, and we have to stay on this path till the time we die. And that kind of a resolve should be at the back of our mind all the time. We can relate verses like this to other verses where the messenger used to invite people to the revelation, and they used to present all kinds of arguments and used to raise objections to reject the guidance. One thing stands out in all these verses, that their own deeds appeared to be attractive to them, and they did not wish to change their path of life. And that is the bottom line. If people do not want to change the path of their life, they do not question the existing path of their life, they are never ever going to come to the Quran. Absolutely zero possibility. Here the Quran then concludes that due to following the wrong paths in life, these people ultimately end up unguided, and their self is unable to draw those benefits of life which are accrued through treading on Sirat-e-Mustaqim. And this is important for us, those who have come to the Quran, that it is their choice. And if we see people, and we should never ever get upset or be unhappy about it, because it is their choice and Allah has given them that choice. Hence, if we have changed our choice, it was our choice to change our choice. And they haven't made a decision to change their soil. So let them follow their own path in life. They also contribute to the creation of hell in the world, and humanity at large continues to suffer. So never mind how many supplication and prayers they have under the religious domain, nothing will change in the world. They have to change and come to this path in case they want to bring a change in the world. This is the story of humanity over many centuries. This is what we see in the world of 2023. Next verse is 16:105, recognizing people who resort to lies and have no interest in the Quran. Innama yaftaril kazibal lazina la yuminuna bi ayatillahi wa ulaika humul kazibun. Those people who do not accept Iman in the truth of the laws of Allah, the real reason for their rejection is that due to their stubbornness, prejudice, vested interest, they do not wish to adopt the correct path, but they do not have the courage to acknowledge and express it openly. Hence, they keep concocting false things and in this way make efforts to prove others as liars, whereas it is they themselves who are liars. Remaining aware of the negative aspects of the human psyche, verse 105. The answer to the previous verse is summed up in this verse by lumping all these groups together because these temporary measures are not going to eradicate the cause of the diseases with which humanity suffers at the hands of these spreaders of evil. Next point, here a severe weakness in their psyche is highlighted by stating that these people who are given this message do not openly reject it, but instead they say that the messenger has invented it himself. It is easier to condemn one man than to wholeheartedly tell everyone that they are lawyers. And we see that in today's world as well. When somebody, for example, if the interview is going on, if we see very closely, sometimes if somebody has said something right, the interviewee will try to attack them for that particular point rather than looking at the context of it. They know that he is not doing this as he is referring back to Allah and not saying that it is from his own self. And this is the great beauty of the Quran, that when we pass on the message, we are passing it on behalf of Allah. And we should make it clear to others that I am doing it on behalf of Allah. It is not about me. It is about your own self and the world in which you are living. And if you don't want to change this world, then stop complaining about this world as well. Then all of them were aware of his past conduct and character, which is pristine, even before announcing himself to be the messenger of Allah. The message itself is an evidence of its own truth because the Quran has declared that if you think this is invented by the messenger, then go and produce anything like this. And we have gone through this aspect previously as well, but I thought just to quote it again. وَإِن كُنْتُمْ فِي رَيْبٍ مِّمَّا نَزَّلْنَا عَلَىٰ عَبْدِنَا فَأْتُوا بِسُورَةٍ مِّن مِّثْلِهِ. If you are in doubt about what is revealed to our servant from time to time, then produce one surah like this. And with that, we come to the end of this presentation. Thanks for your time and for sharing this today. Please feel free to share it with your contacts. You may like to subscribe for future talks related to the Quranic system of Deen.